Welcome everybody. Today we will be making the Dark One Dagger from Once Upon a Time. This is a super simple build and only requires a few materials, most of which you can find around your house. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, please leave a like and subscribe. If you'd also be so kind as to comment what you'd like to see me build next, I would love to hear your suggestions. Alright, let's jump into the tutorial. So the first step, like in every project, is to cut out the template. So go ahead and do that first. I'm going to have a link to all of the templates I'm using in the description down below. After that, you're going to want to cut it out of cereal box cardboard. If you don't have a piece long enough, like as you can see I didn't, you can just join two pieces together, making sure to tape both sides so that it's stronger. A helpful tip is to put a piece of tape down on one end of the template. This way when you're tracing it, it doesn't move around and mess you up. Now go ahead and cut this piece out, making sure to be extra careful because that edge is going to define the entire profile of the blade and you don't want it to come out looking wonky. Once you have that all cut out, go ahead and also cut out this bevel piece of your template. You can literally do whatever you wanted with it from this point on. You're not going to need it, so I recommend just recycling it. Once you're done with that, congrats! It should look something like this. For this next part, you're going to need some cardboard. I'm sure you've noticed that cardboard has this wavy pattern. You're going to want to alternate your pieces so that one piece has that pattern going vertically while the other has it going horizontally. You're going to want to cut out 2 of each for a total of 4. So go ahead and trace your template onto the cardboard. You can actually see that I'm alternating the wave pattern, and then once you've done that, just go ahead and cut it out like so. For visual clarification, this is what I mean by alternating the pattern. So go ahead and glue them together, making sure to spread the glue evenly along each layer, this way it holds. You're going to do 2 stacks of 2 pieces of cardboard, remembering to alternate that wave pattern inside. Once your glue has cured, you're going to want to glue those stacks onto that base piece of cereal box cardboard from before. You're going to want to make sure that the curved edge of the cereal box cardboard matches the curved edge of those stacks we just made. Otherwise, it's going to look really weird and it's just not going to work. So glue one of the stacks on one side, flip it over, glue the other one on the other side like this. For this next part, you're only going to want to trace this bottom portion of the template onto the cardboard. As you can see, I've drawn lines 90 degrees out from where the bevel of the blade begins before I began to draw this balloon-like shape. And you want the balloon-like shape to be slightly larger than the base of the blade. This piece is actually going to create the bevel of the dagger itself. Once you have that piece cut out, it should look a little something like this. Go ahead and glue that piece we just made on top of your blade, making sure to line it up at that bottom portion there. While the glue is drying, you're going to make another piece. Flip your template over this time because you're going to make a mirror image of that piece to go on the other side of the blade. Here I'm actually using that other piece as a template for how large to make the balloon shape. If you're doing the same thing, just make sure you're careful not to slide that glued piece out of its place because if it glues down wrong, it's really going to mess up the shape of your blade. Once the glue has completely dried, you're going to pinch these 2 pieces together and then trace the shape that the base piece makes on that balloon shape all the way around the side of the blade. Be careful to be as precise as possible because this process is going to define the edge of your entire blade. Once you have that completely traced, go ahead and cut along that line. Please excuse my giant turquoise head getting in the way of what I'm doing. Once that's completely cut out, you're going to see that these 2 edges line up perfectly when you pinch them together. This is exactly what you want. Glue on the back piece and repeat the process and it should look like this. Go ahead and cut yourself a long piece of aluminum tape. You're gonna need it. Cut a line down the center of this tape, making sure not to cut through the back, only the aluminum, and then cut smaller pieces out of that like so. take a larger piece of aluminum tape and tape down these sides here. I find it's better to do this now because if you do it later on, it's not going to look as good. Once you've done that, just take your X-Acto knife and cut off any excess aluminum tape from the bottom. This next part takes a bit of time, but it's actually really simple. Just take these two pieces, pinch them together, and tape them down with aluminum tape, and do this along the entire edge of the blade. Once you've done this process, you may actually see a line appear as you complete the bevel. You're going to want to cut off any excess on the interior of the blade. If you didn't see a line appear from the bevel, just cut about 1/4 of an inch inward from the edge. Repeat this process on the other side. Next, cut out a piece of aluminum tape a little bit longer than the length of your entire blade. Begin by removing a small part of the backing, beginning at the bottom of the blade. Using a piece of thin cardboard, you're going to want to flatten it down along the entire length of the blade, like so. Relieve surface tension on the tape by making small slits on either side of the base of the bevel, like you can see me doing here. As my camera continues to go in and out of focus, you're going to want to flatten the tape out along the beveled edge like I'm doing here. Flip the blade over and cut off any excess overhang that you see. When it's done, it should look something like this. Next, take any small, smooth object, I'm using the cap from my X-Acto knife, to flatten out any air bubbles or creases that may have appeared in your tape during application. And when you're done, your blade should look something like this. Making sure to cut only through the aluminum tape, not the cardboard underneath. Make a cut along that bevel line or about 1/4 of an inch inward from the edge of the blade. From that line, go in about another 1/8 of an inch and make another line. This way you're cutting out a small sliver along the edge like so. Do this on both sides. Next, take your template and line it up with that inner part of the blade. Using painter's tape, do what we did at the beginning and tape this part of the template down. You're going to want to wrap that tape all the way around the bottom of the blade actually to make sure that the template doesn't move at all. Then you're going to take a piece of painter's tape the length of the blade and tape that entire template onto the blade. Feel free to wrap some of that tape around the blade because trust me, from this point on you do not want that template to move at all. Next comes the most meticulous, time-consuming part of the entire project. Using your blade, you're going to want to cut out every black part of the template you see through the tape. You have to make sure that you're cutting hard enough to cut through the painter's tape, the template, and the aluminum tape while not cutting through the cardboard underneath. Be sure not to mistakenly cut through the white parts of the template because the white parts are going to be the part of the aluminum tape that actually stay on your blade. Once you finish that process, remove the tape and with a pair of tweezers or even just your fingers, remove the aluminum tape that fell beneath the darker parts of the template. If during this process you realize that parts of the aluminum tape which are supposed to remain on the blade begin to come off, just take your X-Acto knife, go through that line one more time to make sure that it's completely cut through, and then continue to remove it. If any of those parts come completely off, just use some of the white glue to stick it back down. My advice is to just go as slow as possible because you want perfection here, and take a break if you need to because this does take some time. Once that god-awful ordeal is over, you should be left with something that looks like this. Now take a black pen. I recommend using one with really runny ink, you know, like the ones that when you write, it's like you're writing with the tears of Jesus. Use those pens and color in every visible bit of cardboard that you see. This part does take some time, but it's actually really satisfying to do. And when you're done, you should get something that looks like this. Now for this next part, you can use white glue because it does work well, but I recommend using Mod Podge because it has a glossier finish. You're going to use your Mod Podge or white glue to cover the entire front part of the blade, being careful not to get any on the back. Once that's cured, you're going to be left with something that looks like this. This is the finished front side of your blade. Now unfortunately, you're going to have to flip the blade over and repeat the exact same god-awful process on the other side, except this time make sure to use the template for the back. Remember to seal this side as well using Mod Podge or white glue, being careful not to get any on the front side of your blade. Once that's done, your entire blade is finished. Congratulations, you should be left with something that looks like this now. Now it's time to move on to the guard and pommel pieces. Take your guard template and cut 4 pieces out of regular cardboard, remembering to alternate that wavy pattern within, just like how we did with the blade. Using the same template, cut 2 pieces out of cereal box cardboard. You should have this many of each piece once you're done. Next, you're going to glue and stack all 4 pieces of the cardboard together. Once you've made that stack, you're going to take one of the cereal box pieces and glue it right on top. Then flip the entire stack over and glue the second piece of cereal box cardboard on the bottom. Once that's done, you should have a piece that looks like this. For this next part, you're going to want to measure the thickness of this piece using a ruler. There is no template for this part because each person's guard piece is going to be slightly different thickness, but I promise you this next part is not complicated at all. Using a piece of cereal box cardboard, cut out a strip that is the same width as your guard piece, making sure it's long enough to wrap completely around it. And that's literally all you have to do here. I told you this part wouldn't be complicated at all. Next, you're going to want to wrap that strip around the perimeter of your guard to make sure that it fits and cut off any excess. Once you're satisfied with the fit, go ahead and glue it down, using a piece of tape to hold it in place while it dries. It should look like this once you're done. While the glue on this piece is drying, go ahead and make a second piece without the hole in the center. This will be your pommel piece. For this next part, you could use black acrylic paint or a black marker. I think paint takes too long to dry, so I'm going to go with the marker. You're just going to color or paint both pieces that we just made completely black. When you're done, you'll have 2 pieces that look like this. This next part requires paperboard. This is the same kind of cardboard that binders are made out of. So if you have an old binder laying around your house, maybe from school, just cut it open and pull the paperboard out like I did. Out of the paperboard, you are going to cut 4 small squares, the length and width of each being the same measurement as the thickness of your guard piece. Now, using the same marker or paint that you used on the guard and pommel pieces, you're going to color in the front, back, and sides of each square piece that you just cut out. You're doing this now because it's easier to paint or color in these pieces now than it will be after the next step. For this part, I've decided to use super glue just because it dries faster, but you can use white glue as well. You're going to glue those little square pieces onto the front and back of both the guard and pommel pieces. They should look like this once you're done. Take out your paperboard once again, and using your circle template, cut out 3 circles. I find it's easier to use a pair of scissors to cut out paperboard, so I just did a rough cut using a utility knife and then finish it off with my scissors. Now go ahead and stack and glue these 3 pieces together. Once the glue has completely dried, you're going to take your knife and cut at an angle around the edges to create a bevel. When you're done, it should look something like this. This next part is completely optional, but I find that it gives your end result a more finished look, you're going to take a piece of sandpaper and round out that sharp edge that you just created. You're going for something that's going to look like this when you're done. Now take your marker or paint and color the entire part black. Next, take your pommel piece and glue that circle piece we just made on top of it. It should look like this once you're done. Now take your pommel piece and your guard piece and cover them completely in white glue. This is going to both seal the pieces and make them stronger. To make the handle, you're going to need a paper tube. You can find this in any roll of aluminum foil. Now cut out a piece that's about 10 centimeters or 4 inches long. It should be just big enough to fit inside your hand. I have tiny hands, so you can adjust this measurement to fit you. Now take a piece of foam and wrap the handle in it. Here you can see I'm using hot glue, but you can really use any glue available to you. Use your knife to cut off any excess foam. At this point, your handle will look like this. Now take a piece of fake leather. If you don't have fake leather, you can just use another piece of foam, but for this tutorial, I'll be using fake leather. Take your fake leather or foam and glue it around the handle. Remember to cut off any extra overhang. Once you've done that, your handle should look like this. For this next part, you'll need any thin silver looking wire. Here I'm using the aluminum tape to secure one end of the wire inside the handle before tightly wrapping the wire around in a spiral. You're going to want to wrap this wire tight enough so that the leather and foam sort of bulge out around it. You'll see what I mean in a second. Here you can see I'm using more aluminum tape to secure the end of the wire inside the bottom of the handle. This is what your handle should look like when it's done. Here you can see what I mean when I say that you want to wrap the wire tight enough so that the leather and foam sort of bulge out around it. For this next part, take your blade, your guard and pommel pieces, and your handle, and begin assembling. To start off, take some white glue and attach the guard piece to the blade. Here I'm using some hot glue underneath to make the join stronger. Next, attach the handle under the guard. Finally, attach the pommel piece to the bottom of the handle, making sure to line it up with the guard. The main body of your dagger is now complete and it should look something like this. To make the pommel ornament, you'll need 2 red heart-shaped crystals. You'll also need some clay because we are going to be sculpting. Take a ball of clay about 1 inch in diameter and shape it into a teardrop shape, making sure to flatten out the bottom. Now take those red heart-shaped crystals and press them into the clay, making sure that the point of the heart lines up with the point of the teardrop shape. When you're done, it should look like this. Now pop those crystals out of the clay and allow it to set. Now take the blade ornament template and roll out a piece of clay about 1/4 inch thick. Place the template on top and use your knife to cut the shape out of the clay. Now you're going to use your knife to round out each edge except for the flat edge on top. You can also use your fingers to smoothen out the rounded edges. Using your knife, you're going to cut this rounded rectangular shape about halfway through the clay, making sure not to cut all the way through. Using the clay that you just cut out, form it into what I could only describe as Squidward's nose shape, and affix it right above the rectangle you just cut out. For this next part, you can use any triangular shape, but I'm using the cap for this pen. Use it to press what kind of look like eyes on either side of this piece. Once it's done, it's going to look something like this. You're going to want to make a second one. After all 3 clay pieces have dried, color them black. Roll a tiny ball out of clay and cut it in half. Color each half red. Now take both halves of the sphere and glue them right above the Squidward's nose piece, I guess on the forehead of the blade ornament. At this point, you're also going to take the pommel ornament and the 2 heart-shaped crystals and glue them together. It's going to look like this when you're done. Now take your blade ornaments, and your pommel ornament, and glue them all together. You're going to affix the blade ornament at the base of the blade, right above the guard, on each side of the blade. And finally, you're going to take your pommel ornament and glue it directly on the bottom of the pommel, making sure that each heart crystal lines up with both sides of the blade. And you're done! Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and easy. If you make one for yourself, please send me a photo on Twitter or Instagram. I will put the links to my social medias down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I would love to hear what you'd like me to make next, so please leave a comment down below. See you next time, everybody. Take care.